Welcome everybody to the GP Mind Growth Podcast. I'm excited as this is episode 1. I'm going to bring on guests. We're going to talk about their stories, some of the trials that they've been through, and what they attribute to success. The overall theme is success after trauma, because all of us have experienced trauma at some level in our life. And then what have we done with it? Have we continued to become a victim, or have we entered into the mindset of a leader? Have we started serving other people? Because all of our traumas have unique gifts inside of them that allow us to help other people. So wherever we're at, or forgive me, wherever you're at watching this, wherever you're at on your journey, and the journey goes, I like to share with people, so if this was level ground, below is below ground level and above is above ground level. When people make it to the top of the mountain, we always celebrate that person. Oh man, look what they've been through. But we seldomly celebrate the person that just climbed out of the ditch. That guy had if the incline was the exact same, let's say they both were traversing a 7% incline. One was coming from below ground level, one was going above, and let's say they both traversed the same incline, the same grade, and they both covered the same amount of distance. So the guy that just made it out of the ditch, he went 100 yards. The guy that made it to the top of the mountain, he made it 100 yards. By the way, you're not at the top of the mountain at 100 yards. But they both, we're just saying that for this scenario, they covered the same amount of ground, the same grade. The thing that I really want to highlight and celebrate, what if you just climbed out of the ground? I want to hear your story. I want to share your story, because no matter where you're at on the journey, there's someone one chapter behind you, and they need to hear what it is you have to share. Furthermore, the guy that just made it out of the ditch, he may have climbed the same grade as the guy that made it to the top of the mountain. He may have climbed the same amount of distance. He had a harder journey. The guy going up the mountain had momentum in his favor. He had support the whole way. The guy getting out of the hole, he never knew if he was going to make it. He was doubting himself the whole way. You know when you are at that part of your journey. So if this touched home with you, if you feel empowered, if you have a story and you want to share it, I want to share my platform. I want to share your story, so people at whatever level of their journey that they're on, they can take the nuggets away from how you extracted the gifts from your trauma, so that they can begin to extract the gifts from their trauma. Today's guest is Alex Jimenez. This is a personal friend of mine. Alex is he's a man of a few different things. So he does mortgage loan. Alex is not a veteran himself, and he's Alex represents the veteran community more than anyone else I know. Alex serves from his heart. He's always looking to help veterans inside the mortgage industry. He specializes in the VA home loan. Of course, he serves veterans. Of course, he takes care of the VA home loan. But even more importantly, Alex is a trainer, where he goes out across the country and trains other mortgage professionals on the VA home loan. Alex is also a coach. He has his own coaching and consulting business. If you want to learn more about Alex, you can hop on ajnashville.com. But we're going to dive in a little bit before Alex's story. By today's story, and Alex, forgive me, I'm just going to share, by today's story, Alex has a beautiful home. Alex owns a Porsche. Alex owns a BMW. Okay, cool. But Alex didn't always come from that. He created that. He made a decision to do different with his life. So without further ado, Alex, thank you for being a guest on my episode 1 of the podcast. And tell us a little bit about yourself, Alex.
Well, first, it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be your first guest. So I greatly appreciate the opportunity. A little bit about myself. You covered kind of some of the major hard points. I'm in the mortgage industry. I literally train my competition, right? That's what we view them as this competition. That's not who they are. But I train people on how to serve veterans at a higher level, a better level. And as you mentioned, some of the other aspects as far as coaching and things like that. The big thing is, and you hit this on the head, and those of you that are listening already know this, it doesn't matter where you're at, as long as the progression is in upwards momentum, right? We all have made it up and then slid back, and then made it up a little further. Then maybe we slid back further than we were the time before, but then we surpassed that, right? And momentum is the thing that once it starts to go, you can keep it going, and if you hit something, it's okay, because it's easier to get a wheel rolling that you've had rolling before than it is to get something rolling that you've never had done before. You can't get a square wheel to roll like you can a round wheel. But my point in saying that is, the progression. And here's the one thing you brought this up to. You said, he's got a Porsche, he's got a BMW. Those things I do have, right? But I look at the individual that could be in the Toyota Corolla, right? And maybe that individual, that was a major purchase for them. And maybe that was a major stepping stone. And maybe that person just got out of jail, or maybe they just got out of a bad relationship, or maybe they spent their whole life poor and on the streets and they took their first step. So the reason why I bring that up is because I want people to view that person in the Toyota Corolla the same way they would instinctively view somebody in that Porsche or that BMW or whatever, because the person in that vehicle, they could be on the verge of bankruptcy, just lost their family, their wife died of cancer, their children are not part of it, whatever it is. We gauge wealth by things. And so
Absolutely.
I just want to change that mindset.
The people, thank you. The people that I love, love. It's always fun to share the people at the top of the mountain, right? Because it's inspiration. It's evidence of what's possible. It's
Yep.
evidence of what's possible. Anytime you look at someone doing more successful than yourself and you feel anything other than empowered, that's trauma that needs to be healed. Okay, so what? It's evidence. Every time I look at people with more success, it's evidence what's possible. Love celebrating people on the top of the mountain, but wow, the people, like the guy that was able to finance a Toyota Corolla, like that guy, like the whole universe had to conspire in his favor just for that thing. Like that guy, he's going through the hard times. He's doing the things.
Yep.
Speaking of hard times, Alex, would you be open? Would you share whatever it is you're willing to share for the people that are listening? I, you haven't always had the lifestyle you have now. You've
No.
shared some of the. Would you mind sharing a little bit about childhood with us?
Yeah.
Um, Go ahead.
I'll
Yeah.
share it. I'll share it all. Here's the thing. I'm not ashamed of what I've been through, right? And people will say, well, he's a victim. I'm not a victim. I'm a warrior that has went through and has dealt with these points of trauma in my life. Trauma including I was sexually abused by 3 different people growing up. I was physically and mentally abused. I was starved. We were poor. We lived on the streets. You name it. I have probably seen a variance of it, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing. Some of my earliest memories is I remember my mom being beaten by my sister's dad. And, he punched her in the face, busted her eye open. She had blood everywhere. He did this in the kitchen. I remember him specifically hitting her and seeing that the blood shoot out of her eye. I believe I was about 4 or 5 years old at the time, just enough to remember high points, right? And I remember in that argument, he finally left. And I was kind of the guardian, I felt like, of the house, right? And so we went to sleep that night, and I slept on the couch by this big window. We lived in an apartment complex out in San Diego, California, and there was a big window, and there was the landing and everything, where people walk in the front door and everything. And I remember in the middle of the night, him breaking through the window, and the neighbors calling the police, and the police showing up. And just knowing, like, deep down in my heart, like, this is only going to get worse. We knew that whatever happened, it would only get worse the next time, right? That was the expectation. I remember that we vacated that home like that. It was just like one day, hey, we're playing, we're coloring, we're doing all this stuff. The next day we're gone, right? I didn't find out until 30 plus years later that the reason why we vacated is because my sister's dad did not want my mom to have contact with my dad. And so we picked up and left with nobody knowing who, where we went, what happened. I literally talked to my grandma about 6 years ago about this. One day she literally showed up to pick me up like she would, all the time, come to pick me up. And the place was vacant, not a trace of us in sight. She didn't know what happened to us. My grandma used to spend years and years and years walking around the mall during holidays looking for my mom to see if she could relocate us.
Wow.
And we can dive into that progression of that story. It comes literally into my 30s when I finally reconnected with my family, and it came to be by accident. My sister had posted something relating to my mom passing away, and my other sister, my sister on my dad's side of the family, had been searching and searching and searching and saw this thing pop up, and it was my sister's post, and she made the connection. And then she saw me. Well, I'm like an identical twin to my father. So, he's a little bit uglier and got some more gray hair. But at this point in my life, I am subjective to being a twin of my father. But let's go back to the sexual abuse, right? That's such an embarrassing thing for adult males to talk about, right? And I'm going to use some explicit terms, but I want to keep the explicit terms when I use them to be utilized as therapeutic terms that I used to myself. And so the first time I was molested by an individual was my cousin. And it wasn't someone that spent a whole lot of time in my life. This was a cousin that I only knew for about this section. I have a cousin I grew up with, and just to clarify, that cousin is not the individual I'm talking about. This individual, you know, he liked to get his dick touched, and what better than a young boy to touch it, right? And so the words I'm going to use, and I hope I'm not jeopardizing the integrity of this podcast by using these words, but my fear of telling people what was happening is I told myself that people would think I was gay if I told anybody, and this is all my fault, and I can't tell anybody. And so that went on.
Can I pause for just a second? Man, I just want to hop in, and it's crazy how many people I appreciate you sharing this. How many, there's so many, and I know you already know you've already changed so many lives, but to the person that's listened to this right now, that's in such a situation, you are allowed to heal. You are allowed to process that trauma. You are allowed to get through that trauma. You did nothing wrong. I just really wanted to share. It was just on my heart to say that. I apologize diving in, and you hop back in, Alex.
Yeah, no, I lost the audio there for a second. I apologize. I didn't get a chance to hear what you said. You know how my internet is over here in success land, right?
Yeah. Life's always in session. Life's always in. No, and what I said was just sharing, like, there is, of all the people that will hear this episode, right? A lot of people will hear this during the life of it because it'll just live forever out in the cloud space. And so when you listen to this, and you, the person I'm talking about, when the person that understands what Alex just said, because maybe you're still in that chapter. I want you to know that you didn't do anything wrong. I want you to know that you were at one point in time the victim of someone else's reality at one point in time. You're allowed to heal from that. You're allowed to share your story. You're allowed to have success after trauma. And I cut you off, Alex. It was just really on my heart to share that, because I know there's a lot of people listening right now that just hit home for.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's why I share it, right? I don't need to keep it a secret. And some people look, they're like, well, why would you share that? Why not? There's somebody out there that literally my hope is my words just changed something in their mind, right?
You did.
So why wouldn't I? My thought is this, and I'm not a super religious person, right? You know, you don't walk into my office, I don't have my Bible sitting here or anything like that. But here's what I will say. I think God assigns these things in life to the strongest people, because he says, you know what? They can handle it. And by the way, they can share it with people, and they can help people. Yeah. So
that's it.
So the molesting and everything, like I said, that went on for, I consider a short amount of time, about a year. And I consider that a short amount of time, because wait till I tell you about the other 2 times. But let's talk about as I'm growing up. So I'm in a household where I'm not wanted. I'm not the individual. I'm looked at as the bad piece of the relationship, because I'm a remainder of a prior relationship my mom had, which, by the way, my sister's dad and him were friends to whatever degree at some point, right? And so I'm the leftovers of that relationship. And so I would be locked in my room for sometimes days at a time. It's funny, kind of, not really, but it's funny, because you and I share a similarity in this. I used to drink out of the toilet as well, because I couldn't turn on the faucet, and I would literally stick my face down into the toilet, suck water out so I could get a drink. When I was fed sometimes, and mind you, this isn't absolute all the time, the whole time growing up, but when I was fed in this punishment status, rotten lettuce, tuna that had been old, the food that was given to me is food that you would probably give your dog, and your dog would look up at you and be like, fucking for real, bro. My dad and my mom would leave, and they would set this, I remember it was a little smoked colored jar, and it was a jar like you put paper clips and stuff in. It had magnetic top to it, and he would set it on my door, on the doorknob, to where if I turned the knob and opened the door, it'd fall. And that's how he would know I left my room while he was gone. So I would pee in my toy box, because I had to relieve myself somewhere. I would pee in my toy box because I had nowhere else to go. Let's not even get to defecating, because I did my best to hold that as long as I could, right? But I understood that I wasn't a wanted person in that house.
What, as best as you can recall or remember, what can you share with us around What was the piece that what can you identify with that? So there's all these negative, like you're like, I'm clearly not even wanted here. Like I'm clearly a burden here. Like we're not even, I say we as in sharing similarities of like, think about just not being able to get water. Like it's a
Yeah.
very, very basic necessity.
Yep.
And so with all of that negative, what was the piece that kept you going? What thoughts were there, or as far as you can remember?
It was my mom, you know. My mom was my defender to whatever degree a defender could be,
Mm.
right? So those days that I would starve, she would try to slide me some food. I mean, mind you, I know people are going to listen to this and be like, why didn't she do more? Because she got the shit beat out of her all the time. That's why. Because she was afraid. She was afraid for her life. If you've seen some of the things that happened to my mother that I saw, you would be too. My sister's dad. So let me clarify something. My sister's dad was involved in a very large drug organization. And when I say very large, I'm talking about a grand scale drug organization. He dealt with a lot of very scary individuals. Within his family, there were police officers that were extremely corrupt. You know, so all this stuff went unchecked. That's the thing. She could walk into his mom's house, which we used to go there every week. Both his brothers were cops. My mom could walk in, black and blue eye. They wouldn't say a fucking word, right? Because they were involved in this family business that originated, you know, mind you, I lived in San Diego. The family business originated down in Mexico. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to guess what that family business was. I remember as a kid, and this was a joke for a while, but we were at a Christmas party, and I pointed up at the Christmas tree and I said, "Look at all those buds." Because my thought when I saw green leafy stuff was it was buds, right? There
Mm.
was times where there was quite a bit of marijuana. This is, bear in mind, marijuana wasn't what it is now back then, back in the 80s, right? But there was times where there was so much marijuana in the house, like that's all you could smell. And I'm talking about bricks and bricks and bricks of it. So everything went unchecked, meaning he had no consequence. If something happened, cool, so what? Mind your fucking business. And he was a very prominent and dominant alpha. When I say alpha, I'm talking about like alpha predator type. You look at this man wrong, something's gonna happen to you type
Mm-hmm.
individual.
Mm-hmm.
And so that applied to both myself and my mother. And so that's what kept me going, is knowing that, you know what, my mom cares about me, she loves me. Like I knew
Wow.
in my heart that she did, you know.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
the first time I tried to kill myself, I was 6 years old. And I bring that point up because at 6 years old, how do you process the fact that you don't want to be on this earth anymore? Right. And I had taken some zip ties from the garage and I wrapped them around my neck and tightened them down. Um, and we lived in a condo at this time in San Diego, and there was 2 flights of stairs. There was a flight of stairs. So you'd come out of my room, there's a bathroom to the right, you know, bathroom, AKA kitchen, where you could get the water from.
Yeah.
And then to the left were some stairs. And so what happened is I tightened them up around my neck, and I was convinced, you know, at 6 years old, you don't quite yet know how to kill yourself, but you're trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrapped them around my neck, and I started to see the wizard, you know, where you start seeing stars and things like that. And I fell down those stairs. Fortunately for me, my mom was at the bottom of the stairs. The laundry and everything was down there. So when I fell down the stairs, I fell literally at her feet. She ended up getting the zip ties cut off me, obviously, or else we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Right.
Um, the first time I tried cocaine, I was probably about 6 or 7 years old. And I didn't
Mm.
try it because I was a, you know, cocaine addict. I tried it because drugs were readily available. And in
Yeah.
fact, that's how my mom kept drawing in. So I literally took my finger and stuck it in the bag and put it on my tongue, and had that numbing experience on my tongue, right? I was probably hyper as fuck too, which was something that was natural for me anyways. I was very
Right. I can
hyper.
only imagine being 6. I can only imagine. And it's
Yeah.
crazy how at 6 years old, so 0 to 7 is that imprint phase. And so
Yep.
you were still in the imprint phase when this. I just want to highlight this to people for people listening. Is like, what's he talking about? The imprint phase from 0 to 7. We don't have we accept we don't have our critical faculty totally in place yet.
Right.
So if my son just turned 7, so we're like, it still works a little bit, but we're losing it. A year ago, if he didn't want to take a bath, we could go fight the dragons in the cave, and it's good to go. But my 12-year-old daughter, if I say let's go fight the dragons in the cave, she's gonna say, Dad, there's no dragons.
Right.
And it's crazy that it's wild just hearing what you come from, even during that imprint phase. to where you've come to today.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I apologize for cutting you off. I
No, you're good.
well, and what could you, I don't want to get too far ahead, but I am curious as to, um, and we might even have to make this a two-part episode because I know there's further along. There's a lot more to unpack, and I'm curious as to where did we start tracking into the light? Like right now, you're a servant. You care about. I mean, you let everyone knows Alex. No, I introduce this guy's bigger than life. Like everyone knows. If you don't know Alex, then you meet Alex. Then you get done. And you're like, man, that guy's awesome because everyone you meet, you serve.
Right.
Where along the way did that transition happen? And forgive me, I don't want to get too far ahead, so you can take us there as you're ready.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a really valid and giving question, and that's the thing. My whole life, I was always the type of individual. I would, you don't have a shirt, no problem. I got one here, have mine. You know, that was. I remember my mom. I was like 14, 15 years old, and she had told someone he would give the shirt off his back, and that to me it registered. It's like, you know what, I would, and I started consciously realizing that, and I think the reason why is the oppression was so thick when I was so young that I was like, I never know, because I was that kid, you know, they say be nice to everybody because you never know what someone's going through. That was me. I was
Right.
the one going through that shit. Right. I mean, do I have some good memories as a kid? I do. Do I have some bad ones? You bet I do. But
Yeah.
when I look at those things, that's, I thought, hey, what if this person is going through this? Right. Um, like I said, I had extremely bad, hyperactive disorder is what it was called. And back then, that's when Ritalin just first started pumping out. And my doctor was like, give them a bunch.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they gave me a bunch. Well, what they found through the years is the hyperactive didn't exist because of this. It existed because I was at such an intelligent level, I couldn't focus in school. And so literally they had me do IQ tests and everything else and found out that I was way over here on the radar. And they're like, oh shit, maybe there's more to this.
Well,
Right.
and I think I don't know this from a scientific level, but I can relate with some of the things you're saying with my past, and I think that we're being exposed to things. We're being exposed to process things like the sound of someone. What is the tonality in their voice, and what does that equal for my safety?
Yep.
What is the rate that they're walking down? And at such a young rate, we're exposed to processing information at a level that some people will never process that in their whole entire life.
Yep.
Because I too got blessed with Ritalin as candy when I was
Yeah.
younger. But no, I just thought I think that, you know, and again, I don't know on the scientific side, but I think that our because I definitely see a commonality in childhood trauma with I think the diagnosis that they gave me was ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. I think that was
Yep.
the fancy word.
Yep.
Okay. And I find it as a commonality, and I think it, you know, it's just an opinion, but I think it has to do with the fact that how early we're subjected to processing information at such
Yes.
a wide span.
Yep. You're 110% correct. That matches my thought process as well. And I want to touch on something that you brought up. So the acute awareness of situations, right? Being acutely aware of how's that person walking towards me? Are they going fast? Are they going slow? Like, what does this situation look like? Am I in danger? Am I not? That was something I had to read each and every day, because the attitude that came through the door when my stepdad would arrive at home determined if I was going to eat that night, if I was going to get my ass beat, if I was going to be locked in my room, you know, whatever that looked like. So there was always a fear when you would hear the car pull up, right? You hear the car pull in the driveway, and it's kind of like all of us have that driveway. You hear the car pull up and it sounds the same, or the car sounds the same. And so there was always immediate fear when that would happen. And then I'd start reading and tracking. Okay, he's walking up to the house. Oh shit, he's mad, right?
Right.
And you would hear the way the door closed, which I'm sure many people that are watching this now can relate to it. The door closes different when somebody's upset, right?
Definitely. Definitely.
The footprints, the way that it sounds, the first voice you hear, all those things sound very different. And so you start getting acutely aware of everything going on in your surroundings. Not to mention, again, this man was a very, very inside individual in the drug world. And so he had enemies everywhere. And so it was always watching and tracking everywhere we went. He had this, you know, kind of like we do as adults now. We sit, and we face the door. We want to see what's going on. We want to see what other people are doing. Those are all pieces that I'm fortunate and blessed that those were built into me, because you can't, maybe you could, I don't ever want to say it in an absolute standpoint, but you can't train that stuff. Like, you have to live that stuff.
Right.
And so I'm fortunate. I'm blessed that I went through that shit.
I love hearing you say that. And for everyone else out there, like, you have unique gifts in your trauma that when you process it at your own level, you're at wherever you're at right now. And as you process it, you have unique gifts that are going to come out that you're going to be able to share from your traumas. And like you said, I mean, yeah, we could train someone. I'm on the same belief structure as you are. We could train someone, we could teach them that, and they would hear it, and they might comprehend it, and they might understand it, but they don't have 10 years of POW integrating it, POW, prisoner of war. I tell people, and with no disrespect to anyone else, I don't know what it's like to be a prisoner of war. I have went to combat. I don't know what it's like to be a prisoner of war in a different country, but we lived as a prisoner of war in our house.
Yep.
I mean, and that integration level, it's nothing that I would wish on anyone else. But until you live it for a decade, you don't have the same level of integration, no matter how well it's broken down and taught.
Yeah. No, and that's true. That's something that, like you said, you live it. You become so ingrained that your reality is now different than anyone else's reality will ever be. And again, it's a gift. It's something that I look at, like, it's helped me achieve where I'm at today. I can pick up the phone and talk to a client, immediately understand, hey, this is what they're feeling. Okay, now we have to pivot and we have to act differently, right? But now going through the story, because I don't want to make this a 4-part episode, right?
But if we had to, no, yeah, please dive us back in. So roughly, so we're right now, what age would you say we're at in the story, roughly speaking?
We're about 6-7 years old, because
Okay.
it was my first grade teacher. I used to act out in her class quite a bit. I used to act out, and I used to do things that, they looked at and they said, he's just hyperactive. That's who he is. But I was acting out for attention. Well, one day they sent me to the office, and I was like, you can't send me home. And I was upset. I started crying. And the principal said, well, why? And I told him, I put that layer of trust in an individual. I said, if you send me home, this is going to happen to me. I had bruises all over my legs and my back and everything else. So at school, they looked at that. This is back in the day before a lot of people thought badly of that, right? So the police show up, they look at all the bruises, everything else on me, and they said, well, you can't go home yet. And so they were going to go home before me, which I knew, listen, if I've got to go back to that house, I'm done. Mm-hmm. And so I go in, the police are there, the police take me in, and he looks up, he being my sister's dad, looks upset. He's sitting on the couch. Well, it turns out, because again, we're in this time period, right? It turns out that no, he likes to slide down the stairs, and he's a boy, and those bruises are from that, so on and so forth. And again, above the law, right? In the eyes of myself, like I said, both his brothers were cops. You don't think for one second that one of them didn't say, no, he does that. And these are trusting people, right? These are people that you're supposed to trust. Keep in mind, we see a badge on an individual, and there's an immediate feeling that we have to trust those people. And so imagine being within the organization, and the people that you're supposed to trust are the same people that are saying, no, we see him do that all the time. He's fine. That was the worst ass whipping I ever got my whole life. So that night, it was the first time that my mom intervened. And what happened was, he took me upstairs. He had this black leather belt and had a big ass buckle, not a cowboy buckle. Mind you, we live in San Diego, not Nashville, Tennessee, like we do now, but one of those big buckles at the end of it. And that's the end that I was receiving it from, to the point where it left cuts and bruises and everything else. She intervened because it turned into a bloody mess. And I remember him throwing her off of me, or pushing her away, and him basically doing what he always did, punching her, pushing her away, doing all that stuff. He finally stopped. And I remember for the following 3 days hearing the bell ring at my school. We were close. We were 9 blocks from the school. And so I would sit there in my room and hear the bell ring, and knew that I better not open that door. And by the way, I got to pee. There's that toy box. So I got to pee in the toy box, right? And food, well, maybe I might eat today. I don't know. The sun's going down. I haven't ate yet. maybe later on. And then maybe I did get a sandwich. Like I said before, that sandwich was rotten. You know, they might as well have dug it out of the trash, you know? So what happened was I was on the third floor of a condo. I jumped out my window onto the second story balcony and jumped from the second story balcony to the first floor. I had a friend that lived around the corner. His name was Alfred. I would never in my life believe I had a friend named Alfred. Anyways, he's the guy when I had a chance to hang out with people, I'd go hang out with him. So I went to his house and kind of confided in, hey, you know, here's what's going on. Please don't tell your mom and dad. Just tell them my parents are out of town or something like that. Can I stay here? And so I stayed there. That's where I stayed for about 3 or 4 more days. And backside of the condo, there was a rec center, like a community rec center that we all used to go to. And we used to catch lizards and we had to feed them, and they ate crickets. So we'd go tear the tree bark off the trees, and there'd be crickets underneath. So I had a bag of crickets, and I'm walking up the hill, and here comes this blue Monte Carlo. Guess who drives blue Monte Carlos? My sister's dad. Guess who hadn't seen me in several days? My sister's dad. Guess who stopped that car right where it was and drugged me into it? And then guess who said, what's in the bag? And I said, crickets, as he opened the bag, and crickets went everywhere. That was a bad night. So again, the abuse continued and continued and continued. I'll save you all the stories of it, right? The fact is, the only way we could get help, my grandma lived in Riverside or Moreno Valley at the time. And she told my mom, she said, because my grandma was semi-aware of what was going on. Mind you, when you're in an abusive relationship, you become a really good liar, right?
Yeah.
You become really good at hiding stuff and really good at dodging people and really good at not answering questions. And so my grandma said, listen, I'll help you, but you need to pack your shit and move here. And so we did. I was 11 years old. We packed up. So mind you, I was 11 years old. This person had been a part of my life through that whole period. So I spent 11 years being told I was stupid, being told I was a bitch, that I was worthless, that I was dumb, I was an idiot, you know, anything you can think of, everything but a child of God. He never once said, hey, you're a child of God, but he said everything else, right? And so I spent 11 years doing that. Now, granted, out of that 11 years, I'm hoping, and I'm pretty sure he didn't beat me when I was 2, 3, 4 years old, but maybe, right? You don't just wake up one day and say, all right, he's of ripe age now. It's time to start beating him. You know, but I would imagine that probably existed to whatever degree. I was just too young to mentally know that, right? And so even at 11 years old, we moved to Moreno Valley, and it's a different world at the time. You know, here I am in my grandma's house, I'm safe. You know, I have water. Like, you mean that I don't have to drink out of there? That she had an ice, or you know, the machines that in the refrigerator door, the water. Yeah. This is old school, right? So these are the old school that had the little black little cup things, and you stick your cup up to it. I could get water out of the fridge. I didn't have to drink out of the toilet anymore. Man. You know, so food, none of my food was rotten. In fact, if it was rotten, they threw it in the trash. It was crazy to see that pivot, right? We were in I remember at the time, it was a 4 bedroom, 3 bath house. My grandma, beautiful house up in Moreno Valley. And I had my own room. Like, all these things were foreign to me. I felt like I moved to a different world. And guess what? I wasn't getting beat anymore. In fact, my grandpa, who was in the Navy, said if that happened again, there'd be repercussions, right? But like any abused relationship, my mom still kept semi-contact with him. And so he would arrive from time to time, right? Moving forward to, you know, I told you I was sexually abused 3 different times, or by 3 different people. Moving forward, this was when the first Gulf War, when troops were coming home from that. Okay. Everybody was patriotic. Hell, I got a picture. I'd be embarrassed to show it in public right now, but there's a picture of me with all white on, right? Who wears all white and holding an American flag, like just as a little itty bitty kid, 11-year-old kid, 12-year-old kid. But I remember all the troops coming home, and you wouldn't think this of me, especially because my heart and my servant to serve veterans. But the second person that sexually abused me was he was active duty Air Force. We lived right by March Air Force Base. And so at the time, you know, again, kind of like the analogy I gave earlier, the guy with the badge, right? You look and you go, oh, that guy's got a uniform. Uncle Sam trusts him, you know, and everybody's involved in these parties and these give backs and support our troops. I remember going to 29 Palms and watching the tanks and everything as they're returning home, you know, and all the Marines coming back and seeing all the planes. Like I grew up watching planes fly over my house all the time. Like I said, March Air Force Base was an active duty base at the time. It's a reservist base now, I believe. Top Gun was my favorite movie. So being able to hang out with these flyboys, or Air Force people was awesome. Like getting on base and seeing the planes up close and everything, that was an awesome thing. And so, it's almost like the crazy thing is it was almost used as a grooming tool. We used to go to the barracks and hang out with people. Like I didn't know kids shouldn't be at the barracks, but that was my experience. We were there. When I say we, I mean me and my cousin. So he sexually abused both myself and my cousin. And this took place for quite some time. When I say quite some time, I'm alluding to potentially 2 years. And the guy's name is Wayne Johnson, and it's a name I'll never forget, ever, ever, ever. Right. And then we have those feelings that come back, you faggot, you this, you that. And so it was shameful. I couldn't even share it. Like, wow. Here we are, we're getting fucked by this dude. And, we can't tell nobody. We can't. Now, this person made threats. This person did say, I'll kill your family if you say anything. I'll kill your mother. I'll kill your sister. I'll kill your grandfather. Like that literally was what he would state. And by this point, my grandma was there for kind of the first part, right? Well, she decided it'd be a great idea to move to Iowa. What the fuck made her think California to Iowa, where that transition takes place, right? But she had left, and she left the house with my mom, VA home loan on it, everything else. She left the house with my mom because my grandpa, again, he was Navy. And so they just said, hey, just make the payments. You're good to go. And so as I'm battling through this, I finally get to the point where it's like, all right, it's got to come to an end. So I eventually told someone, I told my grandma, I believe it was, and she immediately called the cops. Now this was all handled through a military court. He was court-martialed. I dealt with 2 individuals from JAG. One of them, the biggest thing is it was a guy and a girl that we dealt with. And of course I didn't want to talk to the girl because I felt like a faggot. Right. And so it was myself and my cousin. Major Breslin was the individual that I dealt with directly. And I remember that name because him being engaged was a freeing time. I was no longer, like you said, a prisoner of this. This individual was behind bars. But we had to meet on multiple. I'm talking like, you want to talk about getting grilled. Like I point to the parts where he touched you. I'm like, can I just grab the whole body? I'm not sure if he touched my foot or my dick, but I know he touched both, maybe at the same time. Right. It was very traumatic, and the Air Force paid for counseling and everything else. They said, hey, we'll pay for your counseling. I didn't do well in counseling. Why? Because I learned to shut down. I learned to close that chapter. So just like you would envision picking up a book and closing the cover, I was able to chapter points of my life like that, just shut it down and be done. I was dead to the world in my eyes.
It was so traumatizing. Your unconscious mind, closed it off for you, because if not, it was so traumatic to relive until it could be healed at some level. It's just so traumatic to go through. And that's, forgive me cutting in, I felt some similarities on what you were saying with, there was times where I had to go through counseling as a kid, and I was forced to, and I say forced, verbally threatened that, hey, at the end of this session, everyone better think everything's up and up. And I'm just a little kid, like duping these people for my physical safety when I go back home. And I know it created a little bit of away from energy for me for traditional therapy, and the other thing, they want you to relive that time, and you're like, well, it's such a dark time. I don't really want to relive it in this manner. I just wanted to, I shared some of that as well. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's funny that you say that, because that's how it was. Like, I knew. I'm like, oh, you guys want to see a pony? I got a pony right here. Come on. You want to see my pony? No problem. Like at that point, I was manipulative enough to where I could figure out how to navigate those things and be done with it. I was
and we had to, and I love the term that I personally love, that you just used the term manipulative enough. We had to, and I say had to, I mean, we had the power of a choice, but when, 0 to 7, you don't have as much choice. Afterwards, we start forming choice, but those gestalts are now in place for how we make decisions. And we had to, for our safety,
Hmm.
manipulate any and every given situation. Like we always were looking for what's the safest possible place, because that place may still include blood, but it's safer than maybe death or whatever's next after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, that's where I learned. Like I was duping doctors, and I was healed. I was normal again. So, and the one thing is, you hear this quite a bit. They're like, well, people who have been molested and everything else will molest other people in the future. That was one thing I always looked at that point in my life. I'm like, I'll never be this. Just like my sister's dad. I'm never going to be a woman beater and a child beater and everything else, because I know better than to that's the person I despise, you
Dude,
know?
I remember when I was a kid thinking, because same thing. And for those listening the first time you have heard my story, you'll hear it hang out in different episodes. I'll share a little bit more. But abused as a child, physically and psychologically by my stepmother, and she was abused by her father, and so the cycle goes on. And I remember as a child, I mean, vividly, I remember thinking, I will not do this. Will die with me. Like I will not abuse a child.
Yeah.
And every once in a while I beat my kid. No, I'm just kidding. I don't beat my kid. I don't beat him. And by the way, for you guys, some of you's like, what? Did he just joke about that? For those of you who've been through some trauma, know that dark humor it is real. It
That's
is
the
a way of
recovery.
process, and it's the part of the recovery when you've seen some really, really dark stuff. You get accustomed to some dark humor. For those of you who made you uncomfortable, I apologize. Alex,
Well,
keep going.
no, I want to expand on that. That the dark humor is what keeps you surviving. Like literally, I look at, and here's the thing: everything's funny. So if you turn to me and you're like, yeah, at least that person didn't touch your privacy or anything. Like I don't care
Right,
if you
right,
joke with
right.
me about being molested or whatever it is. The whole spectrum. I'm game. Let's talk. Let's joke about it. But
Well,
anyways,
we had to find humor's, and anyone that has been through, for everyone that's listening that has been through some trauma, you already know what we're talking about.
oh
We don't
yeah,
have to explain it to you. If you haven't experienced much trauma, or only just if there's been lighter areas, you may say, well, how does that possible? But we had to find light in the darkest rooms. And
yep,
that's a metaphor, but we found out how to find not just humor, but happiness and joy when there was none. We had to find crumbs of it, or we wouldn't
yeah,
have survived. We wouldn't have
yep.
survived. Okay, I got a little excited there. Go ahead.
No, you're right though, and that's the way I learned to shut off to the world. Right? I could literally so we're progressing now. Okay, I'm healed. We're still living at my grandma's house. My mom's working at a wicker store, selling rattan furniture stuff. The trendy shit now. The '80s are coming back, and they're like, "Hey, you want to buy some wicker furniture? Sure." So she's selling that. It's myself and my sister. Well, times get tough, right? My mom's working full time. We're also getting food stamps. We're also getting welfare. And mind you, I just said my mom's working full time, right?
Mm.
She's not slacking. She's trying to make it in the world. Um, and things start happening. We get our water shut off. It's kind of going back to the dark ages. I remember we had her truck battery. We'd take it out at night and we would set it down, and that's how we had light. We'd hook up Christmas lights to the truck battery, and it was okay. You know why? Because we popped the clutch rolling down the hill the next morning. The truck starts, charge it up, got lights tomorrow night too. You know,
And
um,
happy with it too, huh?
happy as can be. I mean, it was better
You
than
were you
being
were
beat.
safe, right?
Yeah,
Right.
it was better than being beat and get my dick touched by some Air Force guy.
Yeah.
Um, but we used to walk because it was cheaper to walk, right? Instead of jumping in the truck. And she had a 1978 Toyota pickup 5-speed. And I learned how to drive that 5-speed. She broke her arm one time. And I learned from the passenger side how to shift and listen for the shift points. But we used to walk up to a grocery store in Moreno Valley called Hughes. Hughes is a big grocery store chain out there. It's kind of like a Kroger is here. And on the way there was a long strip. And during that long strip, there was sprinkler heads, and they would same time every night. So we'd carry our jugs of water with us and fill them up with sprinkler heads and carry them home on the way back home from the store. And that's how you flushed your toilet once a day. If you number
Wow.
two, you had to flush it. But if you didn't, pee, keep peeing, pee again. Okay, it's nighttime. We got some extra water, flush it, right? We got some help from the Lord's Cupboard, was what it was called. They would give us the government cheese, government food. Like when people joke about government cheese, no, I had fucking government
Yeah,
cheese.
unless you had it.
Yeah, like you
You
had
need
it
a
white
you need a
box.
chisel to get it
Yeah,
off.
exactly. It
But
was horrible.
yeah, it would it'd back everything up on you.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
So, I want to, well, and before, so can you bring us to a place where we can put it? We're definitely going to have to go to a second episode on this.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about, now life is loaded, life's in session at all times. We have trials and tribulations. Okay. But you had another life altering experience as an adult that you
Hmm.
came through. You have kids of your own right now,
Yep.
and you have now created a life where your kids will never know what it's like to have to go steal water to flush the toilet.
Yeah.
And I want to dive into that a lot deeper. Can you get us to a point where we can put a pin in this as episode 1, because I want to hear all about it in another episode.
Yeah, so that's actually we're getting to that little pin that we can drop, right? And that's, things are getting worse. We have welfare, we have food stamps, we have, and mind you, we're barely making it, right? The water guy, I remember he came and he shut the water off. Well, you know what they make? They're called bolt cutters. Clack that damn bolt off, turn the water back on, right? Well, then it got to the point where they took the meter out of the ground because you can't bridge the lack of a meter there. And going through those experiences is when I first learned that my mom was doing what she knew best to do. And that's when she became a drug dealer, you know?
I mean,
And that's
she
really
wanted
where
to
that,
feed her kids. She didn't want her to see her kids suffer
yeah,
any further.
right.
I mean, I
And
can
she
only
wasn't a
imagine.
drug dealer. She didn't go buy, gold watches and, fancy cars and stuff like that. She put food on the plate. And by the way, you want a bicycle? Fine. I'll go sell some Coke and buy you a fucking bicycle. Right.
Yeah,
You want
yeah.
those Vans? Because I wore Vans that's what I wore. I was a skater boy. I wore my Vans. You want some Vans? How much are those? $55? Okay. Hey, listen, inflation didn't fuck with Vans, right? They're still $55. But
Couple things, the tees and the Vans and Reebok
yeah,
Classics, maybe.
right. They stayed the same. But so to wrap this baby up real quick, we started the life of selling drugs, and we'll, I think that's a good stopping point, because like you said, there's a couple traumatic things, life altering things that will hit, and this is just a beginning point of several of those things that you'll hear about.
I can't wait to hear a little bit more. We haven't dove in deep and just given everyone a little teaser. But to hear, I want to hear about the journey of healing. Now, there was a physical journey of healing, but there's also a mental journey of healing through a motorcycle accident you've been through. And we'll
Yep.
get into that in the next episode. I don't want to get too deep, but when I say the physical aspect, obviously you're going to share with us some physical injuries you had to physically go through, but also the mental aspect of losing a friend.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna just everyone, forgive me or judge me. I'm gonna cliffhang us right there. You're gonna hear all about this in the next episode, and then how Alex has created a life where now, not only does he has a couple. I named a couple cool cars. Okay, he actually has a few more. He has some rental properties, but it's really about the life that he created. And the coolest thing, in my opinion, to each their own, but you created this life through a life of service, through service in other people. I appreciate everyone that listened in on today. If you're listening to the audio, tune in next week. Make sure you subscribe to the channels so you can get the new episodes that come out. We're going to have Alex on next week's episode where he's going to wrap it up. Alex, before we get out of here, what closing words do you have for everyone?
um I want to go back to what you said at the beginning. Never judge a person based on where they are in their journey, you know, because no matter if they started below ground and they're poking their head up top, kind of like a seedling does when it starts to grow, they've made it this fucking far already. Or if they're up here, whatever level they're at. The thing that people say, and I've heard this said several times, is the conversations between millionaires' household and drug dealers' households are similar in aspect, right? We may not intake them the same way, but they're similar in aspect because they're creating growth, and it's the direction we decide to go with that growth. So no matter where somebody is in their journey, don't judge them. You don't know where they've been.
I appreciate it, brother. I appreciate everything you shared, and I look forward to sharing the rest of your story next week. Everyone else, until next week, be great. It's already in you.